Hey everyone, it's Joe Glines, and
Stuk from Denmark here. Hey.
I'm in Dallas in case you get this mixed up because I know we sound a lot alike, so it might confuse people.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Today our topic is so our last topic was actually we were beating up on AutoHotkey, saying what is AutoHotkey not good for, right? And both of us, of course, love AutoHotkey overall, right? It's a great tool, so we thought, hey, let's have this one to talk about what it's good for, right? Why is it we love it, and what are the benefits of it, and when should you use it? One of the biggest ones to me was that it's so easy for anybody, noobs or anyone, to pick up, right? That's between, especially using hotkeys and hot strings. Those are simple things that in an hour, right? Not even an hour. In 3 minutes, you can learn hot strings, the basics, right? And start using them. Hotkeys, the same thing, right? Super easy to learn how to create a hotkey to launch a program.
I see it on some of the chats all the time. Someone totally new, he wants to do this. Most of the time you are able to actually get them to post what they tried when they try something, and it's almost there on their first try. I don't know how much time they use on it, but still, It's their first attempt at anything, and it's a little tweak. Oh, you need a new line there, or you need to return on that, or what's that weird thing you have there, or something very, very simple, and then it works.
Here's a funny one. So I mentioned before we started this to Jackie that I actually taught AutoHotkey to a whole group of like 25 kids at a university a couple weeks ago, and so I'm doing a live webinar teaching them stuff, and I'm showing them how you can, copy. And I'm like, oh, well, this is sending it kind of slow because you're sending keystrokes. Hey, we could just send the clipboard, right, and have it pasted in there. And so I'm showing. I'm like, why is it? I told it to send the clipboard, and it was still sending the keystrokes. And I'm like, I don't understand what. And then I realized I literally wrote like send clipboard, right, instead of Control P, right, But what was funny was it worked, right? And I'm like, how is this working? And it took me a minute to realize like what AutoHotkey was actually doing. And I'm like, oh, okay. But it was funny. I'm like, it's easy. Even for me, it was done this a million times to just not quite think clearly at the time. Which actually leads to my next bullet was the vast majority of the commands built into AutoHotkey, I think maybe there's probably a terminology for this, but they describe, they're functional, right? They describe what they do. Like, if, when activate, or when activate, and if, when exists, and sleep, and which of course it's probably the one common in every programming language, right? Is the same thing with that. But
again, it becomes. I can remember one of the first things I did was to use what was AutoScript Writer or something that actually came with, or I believe it came with AutoHotkey at that time.
Before pullovers,
it was very simple. It would record what you did with the mouse or which buttons you clicked. And the only thing it actually did was it put 100 milliseconds of sleep between each action. It didn't actually record how long between the actions you were taking. It just put 100 there. And first time I ran a script like that, it was just going 100 miles an hour, and it missed what it was doing. But again, when looking at something so simple, sleep 100, I'm not sure I actually had read up on what that 100 resembled, but it became clear fast enough for me to put a little extra there, and within actually having that under control.
Yeah, you don't have to know 1,000 is 1 second to just understand, well, what happens if I double it or triple it? Oh, okay. Yeah, you get a sense of it very quickly. The next one I'd say is which is obvious, right? It connects really well with Windows. So almost any aspect of either Windows programs or Windows itself, and your files and folders and all that stuff, it's super easy to interact, with the OS itself or other programs. And that was one, I think we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about how the difference with AutoHotkey and web scraping, and that like I can literally be driving somewhere on a page and then hit a hotkey and have it go grab that from my browser, right? Which is really cool. Or of course, enter information into the browser on that page, which is really nice.
Yeah, I remember when you were doing your stuff on Selenium, where one of the biggest things was this wanting to connect to something that was already active before you actually ran your script. Right. And that was almost out of scope of what you could actually do. And people that start using AutoHotkey, they almost always have that need,
right?
The need for actually interacting with what I already have on screen. Right. I want the script I make to help me, to accompany me with whatever task I have, and AutoHotkey just suits that really, really well.
Yeah. The next, of course, it's free, right? What more do you want? It's free. That's how many times I can say that. It's free, right? It's awesome.
It's free. It's open source, even, which of course would normally mean it's free, but still the idea of it being open source. Again, I'm not a pro advocate of one of the other per se, but of course I love the concept of things being open source, because hey, if someone comes and says this is malicious of some way or some sort, you can always point them to where that is. And just today, someone came in one of the chats and said, how does AutoHotkey actually send keystrokes? I was like, AutoHotkey is written in, and he was like, is it written in C sharp, I think it's called. No, the base of it is C++, and you can, and he was very happy to hear that, because apparently that was what he was trying to make something in.
Oh.
And he could go into the source of AutoHotkey and see how AutoHotkey actually made these keyboard events happen. And even though it actually was, at least when I looked at it, it seemed like it wasn't doing one simple thing. Someone has actually taken the time to write out a specific way that AutoHotkey does it. It uses Windows built-in functionality, but it has a good amount of logic around it. Like you can choose the send mode or the speed and all of these extra things that you would, in something else, you would probably get a class and tell it the same things, where with AutoHotkey you just have the same in your script. So it's just nice to actually know that you can go in there and see what lies behind.
Absolutely.
And it's free.
Yeah. And then of course, which is what were you saying?
I was just I was going to say that one of the things that I found there that was interesting was I was looking at the source, and the guy was looking at the source, and another user who was looking at the source, and a third user were looking at the source. And we were even looking at different places because none of us was used to the source of AutoHotkey when looking for that specific one. And back and forth, and finally someone found it. I found it to be a great community. Show-off might be the right way, because he was entirely new to the AutoHotkey community, and he had 3 people helping it here and now immediately. And,
that was actually the next bullet I was going to stress was, which really, that's what I almost said, was it almost should get moved up the ladder, is the great community, right? There's the AutoHotkey forum, Reddit, Stack Overflow, Discord, which so for live support, then there's a lot of videos on YouTube. Jackie has your site with jszapp.com, and mine's the automator.com, and then Jack's, what is it? No, actually he changed it now because it's the Jack's AutoHotkey blog. I don't know if that's the URL, but if you Google that, you'll find it.
And you have what is it, stuff on Donation Coder, on Rosetta Stone, all of these different yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. So even though our community might not be the biggest one, we at least try to be where stuff happens when we can.
And
So
I'll have to say, at least, and I've heard this from a lot of people, is that the people are generally people in the forum. They're the nicest, most helpful, spending their time to help solve people's problems. It's really impressive.
yeah, it is interesting, and we've talked about different types of this with should it be more a thing that you could get paid for doing AutoHotkey and stuff like that, and then a lot of people is against it, but again, a lot of people have really invested so much of their own free time, and they might feel that that wouldn't be as easily achievable if people kept expecting to be paid for whatever kind of time they used. So of course those two are at
I had a guy write a question today on one of my videos. I forget which one it was, but he asked a question, and so I saw it posted. I wrote back, and he's like, "Wow, thanks for the quick reply." He's like, "I was surprised you replied at all on a 3-year-old post." And I'm like, well, if I see it, I'm happy to. I pay attention to when people write stuff and ask me questions. Like I try to help, at least to some degree. At least point them in the right direction, right? I can't always do all the stuff they want, but definitely a little. That's what I wish I had when I was learning, right? Was someone to ask a simple question to that they can just point you in the right direction, right? It saves so much time.
Yeah, and that is a great thing, and I think that I've maybe people in the AutoHotkey community that they are inclined to do that, but because they're used to being treated that way, I believe that the people that were treated that way will carry it on, pass it on, keep doing the same thing.
You feel obliged.
So, yeah. Exactly, and I actually love that. Then you can almost always expect someone to do just a small example for you, some small sample code. You can't go in and say, "I need this entire framework to totally claim what." No, that's not gonna happen. And that's the thing. But you'll still be able to say, I've hit a snag here, and someone will almost immediately help you.
Yeah. So the next one, which we actually talked about a bit earlier, but it connects. It has so many different. AutoHotkey has so many great features like DLL calls, API calls, web scraping, regular expression / just text manipulation, file manipulation. So if you want to, back up files or move files around or rename files. Creating GUIs, then hotkeys and hot strings, then using like COM or DLL or control sends or control keys or mouse clicks and send / what are the send message and post messages? Is that what those are called?
Yeah.
And of course, editing the registry, and then manipulating image and audio and video, and then of course, which is what most people fall into, it is the game hacking, kind of sending mouse clicks and keystrokes to often automate your games. But hey, I used to do it the same thing for work, right? Sending, clicking here and doing this.
And a lot of just to grab the gaming thing. I remember back in the day, a lot of what I was seeing was that people in, was it WoW or something like that, World of Warcraft, where they would combine some macros into actually unloading whatever type of sequence they would normally do, and the game would also allow them to do it, but in not as an intuitive way where you would need to write something weird. So it wasn't like the game had the functionality built in for people who were disabled, but to actually use it was a bit harder than actually making a macro without hotkeys. So it wasn't like people were really hacking, not that exact game at least, but yeah, most of what people need to get done start out to be simple, and to me at least, um, okay for the most part. But when people start making those things that give them true unfair advantage,
Sure.
Yeah.
But let's stick with your example, because it's one we alluded to it earlier, but I think it's a really important point. Is that not only is it so easy to set up stuff, but I can personalize it. Like for my hotkeys, I think in Outlook it was like Control-Shift-M gets a new email, and yet I'm like, I could never remember that. So I just remapped. I had it when I hit Control-M, right? Let's say have it send Control-Shift-M, and so I can adapt it to what makes sense to me, which is what you were talking about. Like it makes it easier because I can customize it exactly with what makes sense to me and not have to worry that I have to learn the system, right? And that's a huge advantage, I think.
Yeah, and to me, I don't know if it was an epiphany or whatever, but to me, when I started using this maybe 7 years ago or whatever it was now, and something as simple as a hot string that was by the way,
yeah,
I think that was the one. That was one of the example ones where in Danish, when you actually finish up an email, instead of writing the entire sentence to say lovely, nice greetings, whatever, have a good day, you would shorten that into a 3-letter short code, but you only did it because you didn't actually want to write it all. So
right.
Having a hot string that actually typed it out as soon as you typed those 3 things was just, to me at that time, when it wasn't. Today maybe Outlook has functionality built in that might help you do simple things like that. But if you then also do it like I do, I have some website emails that are for my specific domain, so I won't actually access those via Outlook.
Right.
I'll do that maybe via browser because I'm doing it here or there or on my phone or whatever. And having that functionality there also, that's what I love about AutoHotkey, is that the hot string becomes global immediately.
Yeah.
It's just, it works everywhere. I try to use it.
Yeah, I still have mine for I have GM period, GA period, and GE period, and that's for good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, right? So depending on what time of day it is, right? I just remember it's good, which one of the letters. And again, for me, it's like, this is great. Then I had like in 8 different languages, I could hit like CTY period for Chinese, thank you, and then it would dump in the Chinese way to say thank you. And I'm like, I don't have to remember any of this stuff, right? Other than just the first letter of the language I want, and then TY period. But it was so easy because once I set it up, right, I could use it whenever I wanted. And to your point, in any window, anywhere, it's. I remember years and years ago when I was doing something similar like this overall, but I was using the autocorrect in Word, and of course, that would work in Word, but I couldn't take it outside of Word. And even then, at the time, Outlook and Excel and PowerPoint all had their own. So you couldn't actually type in one and type in the other. They didn't share. So you had to go program in each one, and it was, stupid.
And at least, okay, if your company gets too strict with what you can do, you probably can't easily have AutoHotkey either. But if you can have some other way of getting it there, that's not the actual thing I was trying to say. But instead of having like at our company, Outlook has this auto text, I think it's called, or something like that actually lets you put in something that will be replaced with something else.
Yeah.
But we don't have access to it on a user basis. We actually need to tell our IT department what we want to have there for it to actually be added. And again, with that kind of limitation, you wouldn't probably not be able to just run an AutoHotkey script either, but still. If you can, that's great. There's a lot of ways of doing stuff like that.
While we're on the topic of work, because that was like a next good one is, which we've talked about, right? I mean, we both agree companies should be begging to hire people like us that know this stuff, right? Just because you can automate, you can take one of us, and then especially if there's like 20 people that are doing the same job, you can give them the script and everyone gets to use it, right? I mean, it's crazy that it's not a huge demand for it. And we both agree, sadly, there's not this huge demand for it. You don't see people out there trying to hire people with AutoHotkey skills overall. Having said that, if you can actually do it and show your boss and this and that, it is a good job security, because once they realize that you're doing the work of several people, you're an amplifier, right? You help everyone else work faster. You're going to keep your job, right? Much more likely than other people.
Yeah, that's true. And that's one of the things that I love with AutoHotkey was that I actually had the opportunity to have a lot of work on my table and completing it at a speed that was unmatched by anyone else. So I could start helping them. And when a task on someone else's table actually allowed me to automate that, because I had the room from having scripted parts of what I did,
right?
I could make something for them as well. And as soon as I did that, I wasn't sure for a long time. I lived in this little bubble of keeping it to myself. It's probably best to just do it for my own sake. And as soon as I actually started sharing it, people was like, they wanted me to do more. I didn't actually hit many people who wanted to learn it themselves, but they at least wanted me to help them. And for managers or team leaders or bosses in any kind of way, if they see that working to a degree that makes good sense.
Well, case in point, and I mentioned this earlier to you, but I'll mention on here. So, as I mentioned, I taught a group of kids that they're going through the program I went through years ago, a master's program in market research, and so I taught them intros to AutoHotkey. Well, I also helped the class automate a project they were doing, which saved a lot of time. And so, just today, they actually just reached out and asked if I wanted to be on the board, right? And so I now have an invitation, which I'm probably going to accept, but to be on the board, right, for this, for the school, because of what I've done with AutoHotkey, right? I mean, like, how much more do you want as a way to say, like, knowing the skills, again, it may not actually get you a specific job, but on this, if I wanted it, right, because this is the beauty of it, is this whole group, they're all market researchers, and that's what my training background is in. But now everyone knows, like, I don't really necessarily want to do that. I want to do the IT side of things, right? If I wanted work, I'd be doing these things, and I could show how concepts are done. The other people, board members, they are, people who are, either CEOs or, high level at other corporations, right? And I can tell you, I'm sure they would ask for help on their stuff, right? So if I wanted to get the work, I think it would be a great thing. I just, of course, don't want to actually do the work, but doesn't mean I won't hire it out, get the work and hire it out, right? And still do it.
Yeah. The middleman or the distributor can actually get a good thing going.
Which, and honestly, I say, because I can talk, I understand what AutoHotkey and what automation can be done. I'm just not the best programmer, right? So it's a perfect role for me. As like, I understand the concepts, I understand actually also the business needs of what people do, but the actual doing it, that's why I pay people that know what they're doing, and everyone's happy, right?
I recently did that to actually get. I had a lot of stuff in another language that I wanted to have presented in a specific way. And instead of me sitting there learning that exact language and trying to phrase that and all of that stuff,
Yeah.
I contacted someone who said they could do it, and they did, and they got whatever fee they needed, and I was very happy. I hadn't used no time on it, and it was cheaper to get someone who could do it in less time. So that's often a good way of doing stuff.
And probably do it even better than if you had tried to pick it up, right? Like if someone who knows what they're doing in that language, it's amazing how much better they can do stuff than what, even when you're good, right? Even when you're really good, it's still, if someone knows that language inside and out, they can do stuff at a high level.
Yeah. And again, I've stayed with AutoHotkey for all of these years because it's not my actual profession to program or to sit there and do that day in and day out. I've loved to write all of the stuff that I've done, and I still write stuff, but I'm not really looking to learn, let's say, C++ or C Square because I want to sit at some company desk somewhere and type out code upon line of code.
Shoot me.
I'm at least that's something that's become clear to me. I love code, but not so that I want to ruin it by having it as my main day job, doing it 8 hours and stuff like that. I'm more a problem solver in some way.
Yeah. Another really great point of AutoHotkey is just that I think it's pretty obvious, but just it's so easy to create a script, from scratch on almost anything you're doing. You can, simple things, you can write them in a couple of minutes often, right? To automate some small tasks. You can scale it, right? It can be very small, and that's where I think other languages, even when you have a really small task, it can take a while to get it to actually do the very small things. And of course, you might see efficiencies on a really big scale, but with AutoHotkey, the small things, like you can be done with it in no time, right? It's so fast.
Yeah. I remember maybe a couple of years ago at least, where the community had more people who were seemed like programmer types. I know that people are still capable of doing that, and some are still learning, and some are taking university courses and stuff like that in this. But we had some that seemed like they were coming from a background in programming instead, where these people that are there now are more people who are moving towards programming. That's how I see it, at least. And these people all called AutoHotkey, or at least L after objects was added, a prototyping language, just to call it something. And if that's a good word or not, but the idea of saying that is that you could just so easily make your concept work in no time. You could easily pump out those 20 to 50 lines of code that was needed to do something that was pretty complex. Mm-hmm. I saw some guy the other day. He had the need of, I think it was a web page. He had to go into a table, collect some information, put it in a CSV file, and then continue on to the next page and do that same thing there. And someone helped him, and I think he ended up with something fully functional, and it was less than 30 lines of code.
So, case in point, let me give a little background on that project I said I was helping the class with. That they were going to this website and going to hundreds upon hundreds of pages, and they would load the page, and then it would be like a table, and then they would hit the export and then save it as a file, right? And then later have to go in and do other stuff to it. I'm like, well, the stuff on the page, is that the stuff you want? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, we'll just rip it from the page, right? There's no reason to go save these files and then go have to manipulate files, right? Because there was like, for each product, there were 4 pages that they wanted. And so they wanted those all like in the same file. So they were going to have to merge them all together after. And I'm like, and then of course there's the saving of the file and Excel file. And then I'm like, that's so much more work. If you can just grab the stuff, I'm like, this is easy, right? But yeah, it's a perfect example of where you wouldn't have thought of that, right? If you're thinking about literally sending keystrokes to save each file and then I'll deal with it later, like you don't have to do that, right? You can get exactly, and actually, so they didn't want all the rows of data. They only wanted certain rows of data. And so I'm like, well, we'll just look at what the header, does this change? No. Okay. Well, we'll look if that value is there. Great. Take it. Right. And it was, it took a few more minutes to program, but think about all that less amount of work after, because, we spent a little bit up front to filter what we're getting. But it was,
yeah. And of course, AutoHotkey built over many years for Windows and having no illusions of trying to do anything else, not trying to work on any other platform or anything like that. So the programmers or the developers of AutoHotkey has had an easy time of just focusing on optimizing of how to do it in Windows. So if something was awry with one version, the next version would have that optimized to simply work a little bit better with Windows, because that's the only thing that really mattered. There was no need to make it more clunky to all of that stuff. And I can't remember what it is, but I still think that the AutoHotkey exit is below 1 megabyte.
Yeah, it's
I believe it is.
So, it's darn close.
And so it's still smaller than that. And we don't usually, for all of the stuff that we have talked about yet, have to include anything. We don't need to add any modules. We don't need to have any headers. We don't need all of that stuff. There's really, really no actual learning to all of that stuff. You simply just write, if it's something simple as sending keys, send. That could be your first and your last line and the only line in the script file. And then you would save it. And as soon as you double clicked it, it would send it. There's nothing more to it than that. And where with, not because I know many languages, but most of them have some kind of setup that you need to go through, some kind of libraries that you need to include, or modules that you need to load in a specific way, or a specific way that you need to format it. And here, no. Yeah.
There's a lot built in.
Oh, you need a comma. You need a comma after the send. No. Just put a space there.
Some people would actually say that's a negative, right? That like it's not consistent. Like I agree with you. It's flexible, right? You can it'll do pretty good often at letting you be a little more flexible. Some programmers would say that's not good, but personally, I think
no.
Go ahead.
I'm totally for strict written languages. Makes to me makes a lot of sense with making sure you have making it easier, not maybe easier, but giving you a good strict way to debug your script or your program, because that's an error. That's for sure. You don't have a comma there. That's the thing. Because it always needs to be there. Where in AutoHotkey, very rarely it needs to be there, but most of the time it's up to you. So I put them there, you don't. So when I look at your code, to me it can seem like it's off. But again, short moment ago, we talked about quickly creating scripts.
Yeah.
At one point, it was a big thing with how many keystrokes you actually needed to make to create a working line of code. And of course, if you can not have to type a comma, or don't need a space between the function name and the parentheses, stuff like that. To me, AutoHotkey does it quite well. And yeah, you need to get used to that flexibility, because you will see code looking like that here, and then some code looking a little different over here, and then a third way of doing it up there. And again, there's no case sensitivity. There's no all that types of stuff.
Yeah.
Don't need to use indentation if you don't want to. And
yeah, and the different uses of the percent sign wrapping a variable, that confuses a lot of people, but it's also, it is flexible. I kind of wish there was just one way on that, because it would be a little, then anyone looking at it, it makes, it's easier to realize, but.
Yeah, I'd say version 2 of AutoHotkey that's been in development for, oh my God, so many years.
Yeah.
It has chosen to go that route of being more strict, removing all of that, what do we call it? Double ways of doing things.
Yeah.
At the point, most of the things built into AutoHotkey, at least at one point, was commands, written like a command with a comma and then the first parameter and comma. No parentheses and nothing. It wasn't functions, it was commands. And it's not maybe a year or so ago where it seemed as if the version 2 of AutoHotkey has gone totally away from pointing at commands. You can still write.
Yeah.
I believe that the phraser, is that the interpreter of the script, will still allow you to do it as commands, but everything can now be written as a command or as a function. And when it's written as a function, of course, you need to remember all of the rules that applies to that. But I think it makes good sense, and perhaps at one point completely remove everything that's loose.
Yeah.
So
actually, and then the last one, which is the different view of it, but the whole flexibility of being able to have separate running scripts, right? You can put them all in one. You can have them broken out separately. You can, generally speaking, it's pretty good. Even if I'm running Windows 10 and you're on 8 and someone's on 7, they're pretty good at running consistently in the different environments. Yeah,
and I think that's probably also attributed to Microsoft, who's pretty good at making sure that their OSs are backwards compatible, so we don't lose functionality each time a new Windows is released. And again, with all of this browser stuff back and forth, with Microsoft trying with Edge, and when I heard about that on Windows 10 at the beginning, I was like, so now we are losing Internet Explorer completely, and for AutoHotkey at least, that would have been a big blow, because it's the simple, most easy way for AutoHotkey to actually automate browsers via COM. That's by using Internet Explorer, as that has that built in. So my hope that they will keep Internet Explorer in the years to come, even though it's not really developed anymore. But that's the thing. Now with Edge dropping their own engine and going over to Chromium, whatever it's called,
right.
Then the newer things done by Geek Dude and that library he has for Chrome automation, I think that's a good step.
Looking better and better. Yeah.
One could hope that it would at one point entitle the developer of AutoHotkey to actually build in that type of functionality. So, but yeah, it's just because stuff like that becomes obscured when you actually need to point people to a library. I remember when I started in the AutoHotkey community, the COM libraries were a separate thing.
Yeah.
And maybe within a week or two after I started, Lexicos actually implemented COM within AutoHotkey in collaboration with some other people, but still getting that built in. So when I actually got to that level where I had that need, having it right there at hand without having to write something that wasn't AutoHotkey syntax and something that needed others' libraries, and having to know which version of that library I needed to include, and if I also needed to include that other one because I had to have the remote buffer. No, I had to have the helper functions included. And I was just like, oh my God, so happy that it was just built in.
Well, that and in the syntax alone, which you mentioned earlier, the difference in being able to read it was just night and day. I mean, I remember, because that was right when I started web. I had used AutoHotkey before, but not any object-oriented, no web scraping. And so that was right when I was getting web scraping. I kept seeing these two totally different styles of syntax, and it took me quite a while to understand what was going on, But I'm like, holy cow, this other one, the first one on the old vanilla version, was so hard for me to read and understand. And yet the second one, it was just like, it's so straightforward. I mean, granted, I had to learn the DOM, but still, it was so much easier. You have to learn the DOM no matter what, right? I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, not having that extra learning curve there, and actually having something which I'm really grateful for, that looks and feels as if you're doing JavaScript or something like that, because the syntax was just the same as you would find in every other example online, which to me made a lot of sense. Instead of the library that had been written that was using the exact same structure to put the parameters and the commands in the same order, but because he had been limited to be an external library, he hadn't had the option to actually do it outside of a user-defined function. So that was the limiting part of it. But yeah, that was a great addition. It really was.
Yeah.
And made AutoHotkey able to become even more flexible and have so much more control. That's the thing that I really think has carried AutoHotkey in the last few years, COM, having that implemented into the language.
Absolutely. I know for me personally.
Absolutely. Because AutoHotkey is being able to send keys, being able to act and remap and all of that. It is great, and it has a lot of merits. And being able to do stuff when one window exists or when it is active, or minimize and maximize and doing del calls and all of that stuff. But actually being able to programmatically fully control how a program acts, having a command that says, create Word, an instance of Word now. And having that automatically wait for Word to actually exist before the next line executes, and telling Word, now you need to become visible. Not actually using a Windows API call that will then use the ID of a window to look up if it's there, and if it's there, do the next action. No, just saying do, and then it did it. I really love that.
I was thinking of the more example we've discussed before. With, it's usually a spreadsheet, right? People are saying, "Oh, I'm going to automate my spreadsheet," and they're literally like pasting in the data into Excel. Hey, you know what? Sometimes I'm not going to say I haven't done it. I do, occasionally, but it's super rare, right? When you can programmatically get your range and define it and do this and that and set the values without sending paste and hoping you're in the right cell. It's so much more robust that you can control the nitty gritty of everything.
Exactly. And I remember people actually sending the mouse to a specific location. So they used all of the Windows commands to be sure that Excel was open and the sheet
Yeah.
with the name they wanted was the one that was loaded. And then they would move the mouse to the coordinate where the first cell usually is, if people actually have the same toolbar open and all of that stuff. And then click there and then sending 5 tabs and 2 arrow downs or whatever it might be to actually get.
Right.
We're actually having access to how Excel does it. Yeah.
Well, actually, so this web scraping thing I mentioned for the university I did, I went through the same thought process because I'm like, I'm getting this table, and I could easily put the table into memory and then just even programmatically, in Excel, paste it, and have it dump it in. But I'm like, you know what? I have each column, each row by each thing, and I just felt more comfortable iterating over, setting each value individually.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, the other thing is you turn off the screen updating during it, right? So it's pretty darn fast, and yet the chances of an error are so much smaller than even if I'm controlling where I set my cell and then send paste. Theoretically, that should be fine, but it just wasn't worth the worry about it.
No, exactly. And I'd say with all of the flexibility, one of the things that has kept me with AutoHotkey and not moving on is how easy it is to, we call it compile it, but actually pack it with the AutoHotkey exit and then being able to share it. Yeah. I've often thought about, hey, should I try and do this in Python as an example?
Yep.
And because I don't know Python, I've only done a few online courses or tasks and stuff like that. So I've written a few things, but nothing really. So to me, it's just so daunting, actually, because installing Python, that's easy now. But
it depends.
Yeah, it can give you hassle.
Yeah,
but still,
on Windows it can. Yeah.
Yeah, but to me, just getting from whatever Python script I had made, however long it would take, and distribute that to someone, because I'd actually need to go into the Python community and look up how they do it. Some would then say, they just need to have Python on their machine. But hey, I just had a hard time of installing it on my own. I can't actually expect others to have that. Okay, then you should get this and do it like that and like so. And someone else is saying, no, you should do it like this, get it like that and so. And I'm like, to me, without a hotkey, right-click the script, choose compile.
Right.
I can learn.
Yeah.
And again, it's much less customizable for me, but it's so much easier. It's so much easier. And to me, that's the important part. And that's one of the big things for AutoHotkey.
Again, we're not working on things that are manipulating a terabyte of data, right? That where efficiencies to that scale matter. So it's all about how much time does it take me to create this, and then also to your point, will it run on other people's computers as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I did. So when I was learning Python, because I was learning with my friend Gabe, and he's in California, so we would compile stuff and then share it with each other, and we ran into issues, with them things just still not working the same way, and it was not fun. I mean, you can work through it, but it was definitely not as straightforward as with AutoHotkey.
No, and that's fine, because Python is also a script language, but it has had so many more developers, and it's been extended to a range where those two can't really be compared. But on Windows, for a normal person's needs, AutoHotkey is just easier to learn and to use. So yeah. I really feel that.
No, I agree. Is there anything else that we're forgetting? I think that covered pretty much the vast majority of the benefits of it.
Yeah, and I do really believe that the people who have made the C++ stuff behind the scenes has over the years seen all of the small quirks that are needed to accomplish whatever thing on Windows, and you're just offered that immediately. Here, you have a command here. It will send the thing to the window that you ask for.
Yeah.
And all of those things that needs to go between, that's handled. Someone has actually done that for you. So yeah.
The other thing I'm gonna merge two of your points earlier, because you talked about the AutoHotkey executable, how small it is, but just to add on to that, when you compile a script, right, that you have, let's say it starts off as like 50K, right, because they're tiny. When you actually right-click and compile it, it still stays very small, right? It still stays around that 1 megabyte file. It's nothing. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's the thing with AutoHotkey is that we call it compile, but unless other things, if it's just a script, it's just packaged with the AutoHotkey executable. So if you have a script that's 50 megabytes or 50 kilobytes, and the AutoHotkey executable is 1 megabyte, then we'll actually have something combined that's 1 megabyte and 50 something kilobytes.
Right.
Not much is added there. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think we covered a lot.
Sure.
Obviously, we love it. It's still we use other tools when the fit needs, right? When it's the other tools the right thing. But
yeah, sure.
But the vast majority of stuff I do is in AutoHotkey, just because I know it pretty well. I'm learning more and more, but.
Yeah, and I say for my needs, trying to actually learn something else or going out and trying to make something else work, if it's on Windows, and when I say it's on Windows, I'm not saying it's a website, it's a server, no, it's something on Windows, something I would do or someone else would do on a Windows PC. AutoHotkey can do it, I'm sure.
You know, it was funny. Someone wrote me the other day on a topic about APIs, and they were learning more about APIs. And they said, "Wow, this is amazing! You know, APIs are so amazing. It makes AutoHotkey just as valuable as, like, you know, let's say Python." I forget what he mentioned, and I almost wrote him back. I didn't, but I'm going to say I agree. I love APIs. Don't get me wrong, but the big difference, of course, is that your computer has to be running, right? I can't just set AutoHotkey up and have it in a server and having it automatically respond and doing stuff that things like Python can do, right? Maybe there's a way to have the things configured away, but it's not the way most people use AutoHotkey. And it's just a whole different thing, right? To me, it's I wouldn't compare it to the other one.
But again, without me knowing Python enough, I'd still say that when I'm thinking about it, you would need one of the bigger libraries or frameworks or Rails or Ruby or whatever to work with something that actually is on a server, which is an entire thing built for Python to actually make it work like that. And to me, I think I actually combined another language. Don't sweat it. Yeah. Ruby, that's an entirely different language. So Ruby on Rails, yeah, fair enough. But still, you actually have to learn a totally different part of the language to actually be able to do that stuff. And AutoHotkey is meant to be used in Windows. So have a task on Windows, and AutoHotkey can help you with it. That's what it's good for.
Awesome. That was fun. We'll see you next week.
Absolutely. Bye.